As I pressed down on the rusted door in the empty cottage, a voice from the other side hissed. "Back!" Something laughed softly behind me, right where no one was standing. Inspired by Reese Jackson, the birthday boy, and we hope it's a spooky one for you. Thanks for your 2-sentence horror story. Hello, I'm Blair Bathory, and this is the Something Scary podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Whether this is your first time or you're one of the brave souls who join us every week. Sometimes the end of summer isn't just about the changing of seasons. It's the moment when the world holds its breath and things buried beneath the ground or lurking in the shadows begin to stir. When the heat feels heavy enough to crush your bones, you better beware, because some doors open only in the dead heat of summer. First, It Won't Ever Let Go, followed by Swamp Fever Rising. Finally, in our last story, Not All Prayers Protect. And a quick reminder here to check out our merch store. We've got some scary summer items just in time to hit the beach, the campfire, or wherever you're headed. Go to SomethingScary.com to check out all the goodies we have, including this Something Scary t-shirt, which I really like. The simple design of is really cool. And if you get something, take a picture and we might tag you on Instagram. You can follow us here and subscribe and comment on both Spotify and YouTube and let us know what you think of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening each week. We are incredibly grateful for all of our fans around the world. So, want to hear something scary? Beneath the boiling sky. In the dead heat of summer, sometimes the land reclaims what was stolen, like in this story inspired by Santiago. In the final breaths of summer, when the air hung thick and unmoving over the rice paddies of Niigata, Takashi arrived at his grandfather's farm. The house sat quiet, worn by time, shadowed by the mountains beyond. The fields stretched out in every direction, muddy, vast, restless. Takashi and Goro, the family's oxen, worked side by side as they had for years, plowing the soil beneath the burning heat. But this year, the mud clung to Takashi's boots, a weight he hadn't felt before, as if the earth itself resisted its presence. The cicadas fell silent too early, and the usual chorus of frogs was noticeably absent. His grandfather, a stoic man, spoke less with each passing day. More often, he stared long and hard at the field, eyes narrowed as though waiting for something long overdue. One night, as darkness pressed thick and suffocating against the windows, a sound ripped through the stillness, a scream, raw and ragged, unlike any creature Takashi had ever heard. It was distant, but felt impossibly close, echoing from the far edge of the field where the earth slumped unevenly and the irrigation trenches ran dry. The voice whispered, "Return my field." The sound fractured and faded, then came again, repeating endlessly, like a wound reopening. Takashi forced himself out of bed, heart hammering, and crept to the window. The field lay black beneath the moonless sky, but he felt something watching him from the shadows. He stepped outside, boots sinking into the sticky mud. The voice stopped abruptly. Silence fell, deeper than before. Dawn brought no relief. Goro was gone. Takashi found the ox near the edge of the field, half swallowed by the earth. The ground was soft and wet, as though it had given way beneath the animal's weight. But the gruesome truth was worse than mud and sunken hooves. Goro's ribcage was torn open, and it didn't look like it happened from the usual predators on the farm. It wasn't done by teeth or claws. This looked unfamiliar, like it happened slowly and suffocating. His mouth and empty eye sockets were packed with slick, cold mud, the black soil seeping into the wounds as if it sought to claim him from within. No blood marred the earth, just the heavy scent of rot and iron. Around the carcass, the mud was eerily undisturbed, smooth as glass, untouched by footsteps or animal tracks. Takashi knelt and touched the soil. It was cold despite the sun's heat, clammy and alive. His grandfather appeared silently behind him, his gaze fixed on the grisly sight. Without a word, the old man turned away. That night, the farmhouse lay in restless darkness. Takashi tried to sleep, but the image of Goru's shattered body haunted every blink. Near midnight, the air shifted. The earth outside the window began to bubble and churn in a slow, unnatural rhythm. Takashi wrapped his jacket tighter and stepped into the night. The mud near the old irrigation trench rippled as if breathing. Then, from the earth itself, something clawed upward. At first, it was just a hand, clumsy, grotesque, coated in cracked soil and tangled straw. Fingers the thickness of tree roots broke the surface, grasping blindly at the air. Seconds pass, another limb emerged, an arm dragging behind it like it had forgotten its purpose. The mound grew taller and twisted unlike it took the shape of a man. Its skin was hard-packed mud, cracked and thick, leaking water and earth with every movement. One eye remained covered by a thick lump of dried clay, while the other blinked slowly, blinking in a way that made Takashi's skin crawl. The creature did not speak, but the voice echoed again, a wet whisper that slithered under the skin.
Return to my field.
Visions tore through Takashi's mind, unbidden and sharp. He saw farmers starving, clutching empty hands to the cracked earth. He saw fires that burned too bright and too fast, swallowing entire families. He saw the roads that crushed the old fields, cutting deep scars into the land. The faces of the forgotten stared back at him, eyes hollow, mouths silent. The Dora Tabo had waited beneath the mud for centuries, patient and hungry. A vengeful Japanese yokai that was said to be the muddy, one-eyed ghost of a farmer who rises from his ruined rice field at night, crying out in anger over his stolen land. Takashi stumbled backward, heart pounding, but the earth had changed. The mud beneath his feet rippled and reached out like hands, thick fingers wrapping around his ankles, pulling him down. He fell hard, face pressed into the cold, damp soil. The mud forced itself into his mouth and nose, choking him with the scent of decay and drowned things. He tried to scream, but the field swallowed his voice whole. Above him, the creature's single open eye fixed on Takashi was a slow, terrible hunger. The next morning, the field appeared untouched, save for a single depression near the trench. Takashi's grandfather found the boy's hat lying beside the hollow. There were no footprints, no signs of struggle, only the still, wet earth. He sat by the patch of disturbed soil and waited. The sun rose and fell, and then, beneath the soft ground, Takashi's body surfaced. Half buried, arms stretched out as though reaching for the sky, face blank and calm. Mud filled his mouth and eyes, but from his chest sprouted thin green stalks, the very rice that had fed generations, now growing from the boy's flesh. No one came to bury him. The villagers only whispered, eyes averted, knowing some deaths the land refuses to forget. That year, the rice grew faster and darker than ever before. No one dared touch the field. The road was rerouted, avoiding the cursed soil altogether. Takashi's grandfather vanished that winter. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the cicadas fall silent and the heat hangs heavy, a voice drifts across the paddies. Return, my field. And the earth seems to stir, waiting for Dorotobo to return. Do you believe land can remember pain? What would you do if your family's legacy turned out to be built on buried lives? And don't forget to subscribe here on Spotify, and also go ahead and check out our YouTube channel at Snarled on YouTube. And I just wanted to give you witches a few updates. I know a lot of you have been asking me about the birds, and I haven't seen any recently, so not sure what's going on with that, but I've had a string of bad luck lately. So maybe those two things are correlated. Let me know what you think. Also, I premiered my new film, Rim, at the Fantasia Film Festival in Canada last week, and it was received very well. I have more screenings throughout the year, so check on my social media at Blair Bathory if you want to come to one of them and see my new film. It's starring Bonnie Aarons, Emma Raimi, Tyler Harris, Lizzie Yu. These are all incredible actresses, and I'm so grateful that they're in the movie. And it's about the infamous Hat Man. I know a lot of you are familiar with that story, so again, check out my social media if you want to see upcoming screenings. And let's see. I've got some other projects in the works coming up this year, but I'm also going to start making new content, and I really would love to know what you'd like to see from me beyond the podcast, and hopefully we can share that on Something Scary as well. So let me know in the comments, and as always, sweet screams. Sometimes the heat can melt more than your mind, especially when something ancient is waiting in the water, like in this story written by Sarah Lukasiewicz. The scream wasn't Holly's. Jess told herself that she and Denny sprinted towards the water's edge. Hearts hammering against the thick swamp heat, the scream had torn through the stillness, high, sharp, and desperate, like something tearing free from the trees. Then came the splash. But at the shoreline, all they found was Holly, soaked, laughing, flicking dark, oily water at Harper, who looked ready to vomit. "You scared the hell out of us," Jess gasped, dropping her small camping knife to rub her sweaty palms. "Good. You were all doom and gloom. You needed a little jolt," Holly smirked. Harper wiped her arms across her forehead, nodding toward the water, thick and dark like old tea, dead leaves clinging to Holly's arms like scales. "You jumped in there?" Harper whispered, voice trembling. "It's just water," Holly said, wringing out her braid. "And it's 107 degrees. Ever feel heat inside your teeth? That's this." Jess noticed then a thin trickle of blood running from Holly's left nostril. They'd come for one last summer hike before they all left Georgia to go their separate ways for college. Jess had dragged Holly, who brought Harper and Denny along, not exactly roughing it. Tents, protein bars, even a kayak, but when a sudden storm washed out the trail and one of their phones fell into the water, panic crept in. The dead days of August settled like a thick blanket, full of swamp buzz and the relentless chorus of frogs and cicadas. No breeze, the kind of heat that marks the air sticky and slow, like the world itself is suffocating. Then Holly started to change. That night, Jess was jolted awake by the sound of soft footsteps outside the tent, too light to be anyone stirring inside. Holly sat bolt upright, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the mesh. "She's walking behind the trees," Holly whispered, voice low and urgent. Jess's heart slammed. "Who?" "She left her skin on the branch," Holly said, voice calm but hollow, "so she could crawl inside me." Jess shivered, clutching her blanket tighter. "What does that even mean?" Holly's lips twitched into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The next morning, Holly was drenched in sweat, scratching her scalp until tufts of hairs floated to the ground. "Don't look at me like that," Holly snapped. "It's heat rash. You ever had one?" But beneath her breath came a humming, low and slithery, like a snake's rattle. She refused everything but crumbled leaves from the fire pit. Jess pulled Denny aside. Something was wrong with her. She was sick. Not flu sick, something else. Harper swallowed hard, and she recalled her Graham used to tell her the snake witch crawls inside your ear when you sleep too close to the water. Drives you mad. Jess glanced at Holly standing too still in the sun, neck stretched back like she was waiting for something to fall. Maybe she let her in, Harper said softly. The next day, stranger things began happening. Their camping gear moved when no one else was watching. Tents creaked with sudden gusts in the still air, and shadows shifted unnaturally between the trees. Jess swore she saw shapes just beyond the firelight, like figures draped in pale skin, with faces blurred like wet clay. At night, the humming returned. It filled the dark air like a poison, winding around Jess's mind until she couldn't tell if it was inside her head or all around her. She found muddy footprints on the tent floor, small and oddly shaped, leading from the window to the edge of her sleeping bag. Her ear itched deeply, a crawling sensation no scratching could reach. Holly refused to paddle back to them. "The water's soft," she said. "It might open up." When they pushed her, she screamed, a raw animal sound that made Denny stumble backwards. That night, Jess found Holly crouched by the shore, scratching at her ear until blood dripped down her neck. "I heard her laughing," Holly whispered. "Right after I jumped in," she said. "I looked empty." Jess shivered from sweat in the heavy air. "You need help." Holly blinked slowly. "You're already too late." They tied her wrists with rope from the kayak, but Holly bit Denny hard enough to draw blood and shoved Harper toward the fire pit. Her eyes were too shiny, too wide. Her skin cold and clammy, like damp cloth. Her voice dropped to a register that didn't sound human.
"You brought me here.
She hissed.
You fed me to her."
Then she convulsed, limbs jerking like a puppet's, foam bubbling at her mouth, her body arched, twisted in a cruel mimicry of life. Jess held her head, whispering, it's okay, we're here." But Holly was gone before sunrise, cold and still, flies settling on her lips. It took all morning, but they carried her body in stunned silence, stumbling through the underbrush until they found the road and flagged down a passing truck. No one spoke on the ride back. Only the hum of the engine and the weight of Holly's absence filled the air. In the following days, Jess didn't tell anyone what came next. The humming outside the window, the same slithery tune Holly had murmured. The footsteps leading from the windowsill to the edge of her bed. The deep itch inside her ear no scratching could reach. Her scalp was flaking in the dead heat, and the breath she sometimes felt, not beside her, but inside her. When the official autopsy came back on Holly's body, it gave everyone an answer. Primary amoebic menincephalitis, a brain-eating amoeba, found in warm, stagnant water, just like the Okefenokee swamp. It enters through the nose. It explained everything, the paranoia, the hallucinations, the aggression. Everyone breathed easier. Science had spoken. It wasn't a curse. It wasn't a witch. It was just water and terrible luck. The wrong place at the wrong time. And yet, Jess had never touched the water. She stayed on shore, watched Holly splash and float. She hadn't waded, hadn't swum, not once. So how to explain the humming that now filled her ears at night? The thin, writhing lines she saw moving behind her eyes when she blinked too fast? Or the way her thoughts sometimes sounded like someone else's voice? Last night, she woke up with dry blood on her pillow. Her nose, she thought at first, but no, her ear. And this morning, as she brushed her hair, a tuft came free, light and fluttery, like something molting. She stared at it, heart pounding, because maybe it had been the amoeba, but maybe it had just opened a door. And something older, something watching from the water, had stepped through. The snake witch didn't need the water. Not anymore. Would you dare swim in water that might have bacteria in it? If science gives you one answer but your instincts scream louder, which would you trust? I really like this story, and I am always looking at your comments. And keep the 2-sentence horror stories coming in. I check on Spotify and YouTube very often. So please subscribe here and our YouTube channel, and please follow us across all social media platforms. And now it's time for something from our listeners. And this week I wanted to share an email we received. It's a scary story from Axel. Laughter coming from nowhere and something heavy thumping against the walls. That is what myself and my brother heard when we were staying in an old Queensland house in Australia back when we were kids. This was the first time we both experienced true horror from something that was not part of the living world. At around about 2 a.m., both myself and my brother would hear laughter and a strange banging noise coming from outside our room. The strange thing was, we heard these noises at different nights. We never heard them together. Only one of us would hear the strange noises. For example, I would hear the noises on the weekends, and my brother would hear them on Thursdays and Fridays, and always at 2 a.m. in the morning. Each morning, we would talk about what we heard during the night, and it was always the same thing. We both knew something was odd because every time either my brother or myself would hear these noises, the temperature of the room would get colder. At one point, it was so humid and we didn't need blankets, but around 2 a.m., once the noise had started, the room began to feel cold. I remember hearing the strange laughter coming from outside, and every time I heard it, the sounds of laughter sounded like children laughing, and then the sound of something heavy. It sounded like someone was whacking something hard against the walls. Both my brother and myself explained this to our parents, but they just dismissed it as the neighbors' kids mucking around at nighttime. At first, I thought my parents could be right about that. That is until I remembered the bedroom would always feel cold every time we heard the noise. There was no explanation why our bedroom would feel so cold, especially being in the middle of summer. During the day, it was 40-degree heat and it was extremely humid outside. In the middle of the morning, there were times I was literally drenched in sweat due to the summer heat of Australia. So it was always bizarre at 2 a.m. It would be freezing cold because it came out of nowhere. Usually around 6 p.m. when things started getting dark, it would still be humid despite the sun setting. My parents would practically have the fans running all day just to keep the house cool. We didn't have enough money to buy an aircon. A few weeks had passed, and my brother was rushed to the hospital after having a bike injury at a skate park that broke his leg. So during the night, I had to sleep in the room alone. And just like clockwork, I heard the noises of laughter and banging happening again, but this time was much louder and closer than it was before. Something out there knew I was alone in my room. The temperature got lower as usual, replacing the summer heat, and I could feel my body begin to shiver and shake due to the cold, but mostly out of fear. I started to break a cold sweat, hearing the noises getting closer and closer. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I was forced out from the covers of the bed, which felt like someone had pushed me out of my bed, and I landed straight on my bedroom floor. Out of fear, I ran straight into my parents' room. All the while, I didn't dare to look back. My parents awoke to see me shaking in fear, all the while showing my parents the large bruise on my left arm. Thankfully, my parents let me sleep in their room that night, and things went back to normal. That is, until the next day, I was visiting my brother in the hospital, to which I explained everything to my brother, and once I had told him everything and showed him my bruised arm, he looked at me in shock and told me something in the hospital was keeping him awake as well, and he also had a strange bruise on his arm, but on his right arm. Eventually, my family decided to move house, and both myself and my brother never experienced anything like that ever again. But looking back, it was always strange to remember both myself and my brother somehow had a connection to whatever happened in that old house. Even as adults, my brother would refuse to talk about it and would get angry with me if I ever brought it up. He said it was a bad dream and I should stop talking about it. But for me, I could never forget that night. I just hope whoever is living in that house now, they should get out of that house. It isn't safe to be there. Wow. Thanks, Axel, for that story. I do believe that some houses are haunted, but not everyone can see spirits. If you have a story you'd like to share, send me an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. Sometimes, places aren't haunted by ghosts, but by the prayers meant to keep them away, like in this story inspired by the mysterious Mr. Bread. I was 18 when I first met the Allred family. It was the summer of 1993, and my girlfriend Jade invited me to join her family on a trip to visit her sister, Carly. Carly had moved to a small, insular community outside of Cedar City, and we were eager to see how she was settling in. For me, the trip was more than just a visit. It was a much-needed escape from the weight of high school, a chance to breathe after years of struggle. We arrived in Hamilton Fort late in the afternoon, our minivan rolling into a landscape that felt frozen in time. The houses were nearly identical, modular structures perched atop brick basements, each one a Xerox copy of the next. As we unpacked, I expected the usual awkwardness of meeting extended family. What I didn't expect was the unsettling atmosphere that clung to the place like an invisible fog. Meeting the Allreds was not the warm, welcoming experience I had anticipated. Instead, it was like stepping into something ancient, something unspoken. They weren't really religious. It was more like a cult, the kind of organization that wasn't about love and comfort but control. It didn't take long to see that the family operated under an iron-fisted belief system, one that seeped into every aspect of their existence. Carly, only 16 at the time, had suffered the most under these strict rules. She confided in me that their nightly prayer circles felt like creepy rituals, held in the dimly lit basement, where they would chant in a way that left her feeling entranced, disoriented. According to her, these sessions didn't just invite faith, they invoked something else entirely: spirits, entities, things that whispered from the shadows and clung to the walls long after the prayers had ended. Some were merely watchers, but others, she said, were malevolent. I listened, intrigued but skeptical. I had always been open to the paranormal, but what she described seemed extreme. I'd experienced my fair share of eerie moments, but nothing that could compare to the things she claimed to have seen, felt. I chalked it up to an overactive imagination, a product of a strict and oppressive upbringing. That was my first mistake. That very night, I would learn just how wrong I was. I was assigned a room at the front of the house, sharing it with Jade's 13-year-old brother. Our room was positioned directly beside the front entrance, which was fortified with 2 layers of security, an iron cast barred down with an iron mesh screen, almost as if they had feared something far greater than a break-in. The back door in the kitchen had an identical setup. Every home in the community had the same precaution, as if the residents were trying to keep something out. That detail didn't sit well with me. As the evening wound down, I noticed Jade's mother watching me. She was a devout woman, her faith unwavering. But that night, there was something different about her, a nervous energy, a hesitation that didn't match the woman I'd come to know. She approached me cautiously, her voice low, as if she feared being overheard. She glanced over her shoulder before whispering, "Tonight, whatever you do, don't open the door." I blinked, caught off guard. Why not? Her voice faltered. "Something's coming. I don't know what, but I can feel it. Just promise me you'll keep the door shut." I wanted to ask more, but she shook her head, gave me a sullen look, and walked away. I was unsettled, but ultimately chalked it up to superstition. I promised myself I'd humor her and do as she asked. I got ready for sleep in the small bedroom near the front door. Jade's brother and I were both given sleeping bags. His mother insisted that he sleep against the far wall, while she asked me to sleep near the bedroom door. She also requested we leave the light on. I assumed he was afraid of the dark and didn't press further. By 10 p.m., the boy was asleep, and I soon followed. I woke abruptly to the metallic sound of rattling. My heart jolted. I sat up, disoriented, and checked the clock, slightly after 3:30 a.m. The noise came from the front door, metal jiggling, scraping, as though a violent wind was trying to wrench it open. My first thought was that it was a windstorm, but the rhythm was too deliberate. Someone or something was trying to get in. I peeked through the bedroom window, expecting to see a figure on the porch. Nothing. Then came the click, the lock. The deadbolt was sliding open. My breath caught in my throat. The iron security door groaned as it swung outward and slammed against the exterior wall with a sharp metallic crash. Then the interior door handle began to jiggle. The lock twisted back and forth, then clicked unlatched. The door opened. No footsteps, no breeze, no person, just the open frame and a thick, pressing blackness beyond it. Then came the growl, low and guttural. It wasn't quite a sound, it was a vibration, thrumming through the air, through my chest. It wasn't an animal, but it wasn't quite human either. It was raw and filled with intent. I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body seized up, locked in place. And then, from the kitchen, a thin figure rushed across the house toward the open door. I squinted through the blur of my half-sleep and lack of glasses. It was Jade's grandfather. He reached the door and slammed it shut with shocking force, locking both sets of bolts like he'd done it 100 times before. Just as he finished, a crash echoed from the kitchen, the back door. I heard the same chilling pattern, the rattling, the clicks, the groan of metal, and again, that growl, closer this time, moving through the house like it knew where to go. The white-haired figure sprinted back toward the kitchen. A moment later, clang, clang, click. The locks reset. I called out, "Sir, are you okay?" No answer. The house fell silent. Too silent. Not a creak, not a whisper. Not one person stirred. Not the boy beside me, not the others down the hall. Just me and the echo of what had just happened. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. Eventually, my adrenaline ebbed just enough for sleep to pull me under. By morning, it felt like a fever dream, a nightmare. But the iron door still bore faint, fresh scrapes across the latch. I hadn't imagined everything. Over breakfast, I asked if anyone else had heard the noise. Blank stares, shaky heads, they'd all slept soundly. I turned to the grandfather, who sat sipping apple juice beside his walker. "Hey, last night I saw you," I said. "You locked the doors. That thing, whatever it was, what was it?" He looked at me, blinking slowly. "Son," he said, "I didn't get out of bed last night. I can barely stand, let alone run. You see that walker?" I looked at it, the same one I'd seen him struggle with the day before. My stomach dropped. There was no way he had moved like the figure I saw. I walked away, needing air. Later, I told Jade's mother what I had witnessed. She let out a long, quiet sigh, more relief than surprise. "I knew it would come," she said softly. "I saw it in a dream before we left town. That's why we came, to get Carly and her cousin out. The Allreds, they've stirred something up in the basement, and it's not done with them." We packed and left Hamilton Fort that afternoon. As the van pulled away, I looked back at the house. The iron door stood shut and still in the morning light, calm, ordinary. But I knew what I had seen. I never went back to that town, and I never again doubted the things that wait beyond the veil. Would you have opened the door? What would you do if someone you trusted swore they had a dream warning you about that night? This week's podcast stories were edited by Sarah Lukasiewicz, narration by Blair Bathory, audio edited and mixed by Fitz Harris, additional audio editing by Calvin Linderman, produced by Anna Villalobos, executive produced by Gail Gilman, music by Sapphire Sindalo and Calvin Linderman. If you have a story you'd like to submit, send me an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. Don't forget to watch the video version of Something Scary over at youtube.com/snarled. And if you'd like to support the show and everything we do at Snarled, join our Patreon at patreon.com/snarled. As always, thank you, witches. I really appreciate you joining me this week for 3 original scary tales. And like I said earlier, please subscribe here on Spotify and over on our YouTube channel and follow us across all platforms. Sweet screams.